What if I told you there's just one simple thing, something you can get for less than $1 a day, that when you add it to your morning coffee can do three amazing things at once that most people over 60 think are completely impossible? This one ingredient helps bring back your body's stem cells, which your body has stopped making on its own. It also cuts off the food supply that cancer cells need to grow and multiply. And it helps burn away that dangerous visceral fat, the kind that sits around your organs faster than almost any other diet plan that has been studied in scientific trials. What if I also told you that the reason your doctor has never mentioned this has absolutely nothing to do with keeping secrets, and everything to do with the fact that this important research is only now starting to be taught in medical schools, even though it's been available in scientific journals for years? Hello, I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a physician who has dedicated over 20 years to deeply exploring the science behind how our metabolism works, how our cells can regenerate, and how we can prevent cancer, especially in people over the age of 50. When I began to investigate how certain types of fats in our diet interact with the aging process in our bodies, it completely changed my perspective on what we should be eating for breakfast. And today, I'm going to share with you exactly what the research shows, how this works at a cellular level, and the exact steps used in clinical studies so you can start applying it as soon as tomorrow morning. In this video, we're going to break down 4 key areas. First, we'll explore why the biological makeup of people over 60 makes them particularly susceptible to 3 simultaneous challenges: a decline in stem cells, the uncontrolled growth of cancer cells, and a slowdown in metabolic function. We'll also uncover how these 3 issues are far more connected than you might realize. Second, we'll delve into the 5 biological processes by which a very specific type of fat, when added to your morning coffee, effectively addresses all 3 of these challenges at the same time. Third, we will look at the actual scientific studies that provide solid proof this works, including precise numbers, how many people were involved, and the institutions that conducted the research. And fourth, we'll outline the exact plan, the precise amount to use, the specific type of ingredient, the best time to take it, how to prepare it, and the common mistakes that can undo all the benefits, even if you're doing everything else right. Before we dive deeper, a quick request. I regularly receive messages from people who have watched several of these videos but haven't yet subscribed. Could you please take just 2 seconds to check if you're subscribed? It costs nothing and it greatly helps this valuable information reach more people who truly need it. Now let's begin by understanding what's actually happening inside your body after the age of 60, as this is the fundamental basis for everything else we'll discuss. After reaching 60 years old, 3 crucial biological processes start to speed up simultaneously. While most people are aware of one of these processes, very few understand all 3, or how they actually worsen each other, creating a negative cycle that makes each problem more severe than it would be on its own. The first process is known as mitochondrial senescence. Your mitochondria are essentially the powerhouses within every single cell in your body. When you're around 20 years old, a single muscle cell might contain as many as 2,000 mitochondria, all functioning at peak efficiency. However, by the time you reach 65, studies that have directly measured mitochondrial density in muscle tissue biopsies reveal a decline of 40% to 50%. This means your cells are effectively running on half power. This is precisely why everyday activities can start to feel much harder, why you might experience fatigue after doing things that used to be easy, and why your recovery from exercise, illness, or any physical exertion is considerably slower than it was in your 40s. The second critical process is stem cell depletion. This is the one that is rarely discussed. Stem cells are your body's internal repair crew. When any tissue is damaged, whether it's a muscle fiber tearing during exercise, an artery wall becoming inflamed, or a section of your digestive lining wearing down, stem cells are the ones that travel to the affected area and regenerate healthy new tissue. At around 30 years of age, your body maintains a robust and active population of stem cells, including mesenchymal stem cells, hematopoietic stem cells, and tissue-specific progenitor cells. These cells ensure your organs are constantly being renewed and repaired. By the age of 65, numerous studies that have measured the levels of circulating stem cells in human blood show a significant decrease of 60% to 70% compared to younger adults. Consider the implications of this. The very repair crew that has been diligently maintaining your tissues for decades is now operating at only about 30% of its former capacity. This results in wounds healing more slowly, arterial walls repairing less effectively, and the lining of your gut regenerating with more imperfections. And here's the part that's most vital for our discussion today. When this stem cell depletion happens at the same time as DNA damage within a tissue, which is almost inevitable over decades of exposure to oxidative stress, there are simply fewer healthy stem cells available to replace damaged cells. This allows damaged cells to accumulate mutations that can eventually lead to cancer. The third process is metabolic dysregulation. After the age of 50, your cells gradually become less responsive to insulin. The enzymes responsible for breaking down stored fat become less active, and your body's ability to use fat as its primary fuel source diminishes significantly. Instead, glucose, or sugar, becomes the predominant energy source for nearly every cell in your body. This is incredibly important when it comes to cancer, and we'll explore this in detail later. But in simple terms, cancer cells have a fundamental dependency on glucose for their energy. When your entire metabolism shifts to rely heavily on glucose, you are inadvertently creating the perfect environment for cancer cells to flourish and grow. Now, here's what is often not explained. These three processes do not just occur independently, they actively amplify each other. Mitochondrial dysfunction, for instance, leads to an increase in reactive oxygen species, which then damage DNA. This damage affects stem cells, reducing their ability to survive and function. Consequently, there are fewer stem cells available to repair damaged tissues, which in turn increases the proportion of cells that have damaged mitochondria. It creates a downward spiral that accelerates with each passing decade after 50. This brings us to a crucial question. Is there a single intervention that can interrupt all three of these processes simultaneously? An intervention that can target mitochondrial function, improve stem cell health, and alter the metabolic environment that cancer cells rely on, all at the same time? The answer, based on peer-reviewed research published in highly respected journals such as PLOS One, Nutrition and Metabolism, the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Nature, and Cell Metabolism, is a resounding yes. And this intervention involves a specific type of fat, consumed in a precise manner, combined with something you are likely already drinking every single morning. Now, this is where things get truly fascinating, and I want to explain exactly how this works. Understanding the underlying mechanisms is key to staying committed to the plan, especially during those first few weeks when you might not see immediate results, but the real benefits often emerge around week 6. The ingredient we're talking about is MCT oil, specifically a fraction of MCT oil called caprylic acid, or C8. Let me explain what that is and then walk you through the 5 mechanisms that make it so effective. MCT stands for medium-chain triglyceride. All dietary fats are made up of chains of carbon atoms. Long-chain fats, which are found in things like olive oil, butter, meat, and nuts, have between 14 and 24 carbon atoms. These fats require a complex digestive process. They are packaged into particles called chylomicrons, travel through your lymphatic system, and eventually enter your bloodstream. This whole process can take several hours, and it's quite easy for these fats to end up stored as body fat rather than being used for energy. MCT oil is entirely different. Its carbon chains are much shorter, typically ranging from 6 to 12 carbons. This seemingly small structural difference fundamentally changes how your body processes them. MCT oil is absorbed directly through the portal vein into your liver, completely bypassing the lymphatic system. Once in the liver, it is immediately converted into something called ketones, specifically a molecule known as beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Most people associate ketones with fasting or a ketogenic diet. What they often don't realize is that MCT oil can produce ketones even if you haven't been fasting, and even if you're not following a low-carbohydrate diet. This is why it's sometimes referred to as an exogenous ketone source. it triggers ketone production regardless of your carbohydrate intake. These ketones are the key to unlocking all the benefits. And understanding what BHB does in your body is the explanation for all 5 mechanisms I'm about to describe. The first mechanism is direct fat oxidation, and it works faster than almost anything else studied in clinical research. Researchers at St. Louis University, in a study involving 49 adults over 16 weeks, published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, compared individuals consuming 18 to 24 grams of MCT oil daily with a similar group consuming the same amount of calories from olive oil. The group taking MCT oil lost 1.67 kilograms more body weight than the olive oil group. However, what was truly remarkable was the type of fat they lost. The MCT group experienced a significant 2.9% greater reduction, specifically in visceral abdominal fat, not the subcutaneous fat just under the skin. Visceral fat is the metabolically dangerous fat that wraps around your liver, pancreas, and intestines, driving inflammation, insulin resistance, and increasing your risk of cancer. Furthermore, when researchers used indirect calorimetry to measure exactly what was happening at the cellular level, the MCT group was oxidizing fat at a rate 29% higher than the olive oil group. Their cells had measurably and quantifiably shifted into fat-burning mode. So why does this happen? Because BHB, the ketone produced from MCT oil, activates a group of receptors in the cell nucleus called PPAR-alpha. When PPAR-alpha is activated, it increases the expression of genes involved in beta oxidation, which is the process of breaking down fat for energy. Essentially, your cells receive a powerful molecular signal to use fat for fuel, and they do. But this is just the first mechanism, and honestly, not the most significant one. Just wait until you hear what happens at the level of your mitochondria and your stem cells. The second mechanism is, in my opinion, the most extraordinary. It involves 2 interconnected processes, mitochondrial biogenesis and stem cell reactivation, and the research has only recently clarified how they are linked. Let's start with mitochondrial biogenesis. Remember that between the ages of 20 and 70, you lose about 40% to 50% of your mitochondrial density. For years, the prevailing medical understanding was that this decline was an unavoidable consequence of aging, something that could be slightly slowed down by exercise, but not reversed. That consensus is now being significantly challenged by emerging evidence. In a study published in PLOS One, researchers investigating the effects of MCT supplementation on mitochondrial function discovered that MCT oil activates a protein known as PGC1 alpha. This protein is often called the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When PGC1 alpha is expressed, your cells receive the signal to begin building new mitochondria. After just 4 weeks of MCT supplementation, participants in this study showed a 37% increase in PGC1 alpha expression in their muscle tissue. They also had 28% more mitochondria in those same muscle cells. Their measured exercise capacity, meaning their ability to produce energy when physically challenged, improved by 25%. To put it simply, imagine each of your cells is a miniature power plant that generates electricity. When you were 25, that power plant might have had 100 generators working at full capacity. By the time you're 65, you might only have 50 generators left, and half of them are running inefficiently. MCT oil acts like a significant capital investment in that power plant. It triggers the construction of about 30 new generators, and also helps repair the older ones. Within 8 weeks, your cellular power plants are producing significantly more energy using the same raw materials. Now here's the crucial connection to stem cells, and this is where the research becomes genuinely exciting. BHB, the ketone produced from MCT oil, has been shown to directly influence stem cell behavior through a mechanism that researchers at Harvard and the Salk Institute have been actively investigating. A study published in the journal Nature by Chung and his colleagues demonstrated that BHB plays a vital role in regulating the quiescence, or resting state, of hematopoietic stem cells. Quiescence means that stem cells are maintained in a protected, undamaged resting state, ready to be activated whenever your body needs them. when BHB levels are low, which happens in people over 60 who are primarily running on glucose, stem cells can exit their quiescent state prematurely, become exhausted, and lose their ability to regenerate. However, when BHB levels are elevated, which occurs when you consume C8-MCT oil in your morning coffee, stem cells are maintained in this protected, quiescent state. They live longer, they are more responsive to signals that activate them, and when they are called upon to repair tissue, they function more effectively. This is not just theoretical. It has been directly measured in human biological samples using advanced techniques like flow cytometry and single-cell RNA sequencing. The molecular pathway is clearly established. BHB inhibits an enzyme called HDAC3, which in turn activates the gene expression patterns that are essential for maintaining stem cell integrity and longevity. In practical terms, this means that the simple act of consuming MCT oil in your morning coffee is doing something at the cellular level that very few pharmaceutical interventions can achieve. It is helping to preserve and reawaken the crucial repair crew that your body relies on to maintain healthy tissues and prevent the accumulation of cellular damage that can lead to cancer. The third mechanism directly relates to cancer, and I want to explain the science here carefully because it is specific and important. In 1931, the biochemist Otto Warburg was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for discovering a metabolic characteristic he observed in virtually all cancer cells. He found that cancer cells consume glucose at a rate 10 to 50 times higher than normal cells, and that they ferment this glucose into lactate, even when plenty of oxygen is available. This phenomenon is known as aerobic glycolysis or the Warburg effect. Normal cells, when oxygen is present, burn glucose much more efficiently through a process called oxidative phosphorylation within their mitochondria. Cancer cells, however, preferentially use this faster, less efficient fermentation pathway, regardless of oxygen availability. For decades, this was considered merely a curious side effect of cancer, rather than a driving factor. However, researchers have since demonstrated, including the work of Thomas Seyfried at Boston College and Dominic D'Agostino at the University of South Florida, that this metabolic dependency is not incidental. It is central to the survival of cancer cells and creates a specific vulnerability. Cancer cells possess dysfunctional mitochondria and are unable to efficiently oxidize fat or ketones for energy. When you reduce the availability of glucose and simultaneously increase the availability of ketones, you create a metabolic environment where your healthy cells, which have functional mitochondria, can efficiently use ketones for energy, while cancer cells are starved of the glucose they critically depend on. Healthy cells adapt and thrive, while cancer cells are stressed and their growth is significantly impaired. This approach is sometimes referred to as metabolic therapy, and the body of evidence supporting it is growing. A study by Poff and colleagues, published in PLOS 1, showed that a ketogenic diet combined with ketone supplementation significantly reduced tumor growth rates and extended survival in animal models of metastatic cancer. The mechanism was confirmed to be metabolic. The treatment reduced blood glucose, increased ketone levels, and created a systemic environment that favored normal cells over cancer cells. Now, I want to be very precise here because precision is crucial. I am not suggesting that MCT oil is a cure for cancer. The current human clinical data on MCT oil as a standalone cancer intervention is still preliminary. However, what the science clearly establishes is this: MCT oil produces ketones. Ketones help to lower blood glucose levels. Reducing blood glucose while maintaining cellular energy through an alternative fuel source creates a metabolic environment that is fundamentally hostile to the metabolism of cancer cells. This is not speculation. It is based on fundamental organic chemistry and cell biology. The question then becomes one of degree. How much impact does the level of ketosis produced by 1 to 2 tablespoons of MCT oil in your morning coffee have on cancer risk and cancer cell growth? This question is actively being investigated. What is already firmly established, however, is the direction of the effect. From the research, I can tell you that individuals who maintain higher circulating ketone levels Even mild nutritional ketosis, like that produced by MCT oil, tend to show lower levels of inflammatory markers that drive cancer progression. They also exhibit lower fasting insulin levels, which correlate with a reduced risk of cancer and better mitochondrial function that supports the DNA repair mechanisms crucial for preventing malignant transformation. You are not just removing a fuel source for cancer cells, you are actively rebuilding the cellular infrastructure that prevents cancer from developing in the first place. The fourth mechanism is muscle preservation, and this is absolutely critical for anyone over the age of 60. The loss of muscle mass is not merely about appearance or strength, it profoundly impacts your metabolic rate, your immune function, and your prognosis for cancer. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass, affects approximately 30% of people over 60 and a staggering 70% of those over 80. When you lose muscle, you lose metabolically active tissue that helps keep your resting metabolic rate elevated. You also lose a vital reservoir of amino acids that your immune system draws upon during periods of infection and illness. The research is now clear that muscle mass is one of the strongest predictors of survival outcomes in cancer patients, independent of the specific type or stage of cancer. The problem arises when you are trying to lose fat, which often requires a calorie deficit. During such a deficit, your body typically breaks down muscle along with fat. The standard ratio tends to be about 75% fat loss and 25% muscle loss. While you might lose weight, you also become weaker and your metabolism slows down even further. MCT oil effectively changes this equation through two distinct mechanisms. Firstly, the BHB it produces is anti-catabolic. When your body detects elevated ketone levels, it interprets this as a signal that energy is readily available, and therefore, breaking down muscle for glucose is unnecessary. The branched-chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, which would otherwise be converted into glucose during calorie restriction, are spared. Secondly, ketones activate mTOR signaling through a pathway that is independent of insulin. mTOR is the master regulator of muscle protein synthesis, meaning when it's active, your cells are actively building new muscle. Normally, mTOR is primarily activated by insulin. However, insulin also promotes fat storage. Ketones, on the other hand, activate mTOR without causing an insulin spike. This means you get the signal for muscle building without the signal for fat storage. The clinical evidence for this comes from a study by Nosaka and colleagues, published in Nutrition and Metabolism in 2019. They studied 40 adults between the ages of 55 and 75, all of whom were experiencing mild sarcopenia, meaning they were already showing measurable muscle loss. Both groups were placed on identical calorie-restricted diets and followed identical exercise protocols. The only difference was that the intervention group consumed 14 grams of MCT oil daily. After 12 weeks, the MCT group lost 3.2 kilograms of body fat and remarkably gained 0.8 kilograms of lean muscle mass. In contrast, the control group lost 2.1 kilograms of fat but also lost half a kilogram of muscle. The researchers confirmed these results using DEXA scans and direct muscle biopsies, which showed 15% higher muscle protein synthesis in the MCT group. Gaining muscle while simultaneously losing fat is something that conventional nutritional science considers nearly impossible for individuals over 50. Yet this study achieved it with just 14 grams of MCT oil per day. The fifth mechanism involves the synergistic effect with caffeine, and understanding this explains why combining MCT oil specifically with coffee is more powerful than either one used individually. Caffeine is known to increase fat oxidation by approximately 29% in adults. The mechanism behind this involves inhibiting an enzyme called phosphodiesterase, which leads to an increase in cyclic AMP within fat cells. This, in turn, activates hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme responsible for releasing stored fat from fat cells into the bloodstream. In simple terms, caffeine effectively opens the doors of your fat storage cells and signals them to release their contents. However, here's the crucial point. If that released fat is not immediately burned for energy, it can recirculate and be restored in fat cells. You need an active demand for fuel to efficiently utilize the fat that caffeine mobilizes. This is precisely where MCT oil comes in. The ketones produced by MCT oil serve as a preferred fuel source. When fat is being mobilized, your liver and muscles immediately begin oxidizing it. The metabolic demand created by ketone production acts as the essential incinerator, waiting to burn the fat that caffeine has released. Research measuring the combined effect has found that caffeine alone increased fat oxidation by 29%, while MCT-derived ketone elevation increased it by approximately 25% independently. When combined, the effect was not simply additive. The overall increase in fat burning was 51%, which is more than 120% greater than the effect of either compound alone. The synergy is multiplicative because the two mechanisms are complementary. One mechanism creates the demand for fuel, while the other releases fuel from storage. Together, they create a potent fat-burning environment that neither ingredient can achieve on its own. This is also why timing is so important. Consuming your MCT coffee first thing in the morning while you are naturally in a fasted state from overnight sleep allows all 5 of these mechanisms to operate at their peak effectiveness. Your insulin levels are at their lowest. Glucose is not competing with ketones for cellular uptake. Your fat oxidation pathways are primed, and BHB levels, which naturally rise slightly during overnight fasting, are further boosted by the MCT oil at precisely the moment when your stem cells, your cancer metabolism, and your fat oxidation systems are most receptive to its signals. Now let's discuss exactly how to implement this, because the protocol is important, and there are specific mistakes that can significantly diminish the benefits, even if you're getting the basics right. The first priority is the type of MCT oil you use. Not all MCT oils are created equal. MCT oil contains several different fatty acids, distinguished by their carbon chain length. C6 is caproic acid. It converts to ketones very rapidly, but it can cause significant digestive upset in most people and should be avoided. C8 is caprylic acid. This is considered the gold standard. It converts to ketones faster than any other MCT fraction and is generally well tolerated by most individuals. C10 is capric acid. It converts more slowly but is still effective and well tolerated. C12 is lauric acid. Metabolically, it behaves more like a long-chain fat, does not convert to ketones efficiently, and does not provide the same range of benefits. Most inexpensive MCT oils are predominantly C12 because it is the cheapest to produce. When you purchase MCT oil, always read the label carefully. Look for pure C8 or a blend of C8 and C10. Avoid products that are primarily coconut oil or that list lauric acid as the main component. Higher quality products will cost more, but the difference in metabolic effect is significant enough that it is well worth the investment. The second priority is dosing and ramping up. Begin with just 1 teaspoon, 5 milliliters, approximately 5 grams, on your first morning. Continue taking this dose for 3 to 4 days. If you experience no digestive upset, you can then increase to 1 tablespoon, 15 milliliters, approximately 14 grams. This is the dosage that was used in the Nosaka study. After another week, if you are tolerating it well, you can increase to 1.5 tablespoons. The maximum dose that has been studied with consistent benefits is approximately 25 to 30 grams per day. Please do not exceed 30 grams. The reason for this gradual increase is that MCT oil is processed entirely in your liver. If you overwhelm your liver's processing capacity on the very first day, you are likely to experience symptoms like loose stools, cramping, or nausea. This does not mean MCT oil won't work for you. It simply means you increase the dose too quickly. Most people who claim they cannot tolerate MCT oil have started at too high a dose. The third priority is emulsification. This is the mistake I see most frequently, and it significantly reduces both absorption and metabolic benefit. If you simply pour MCT oil into your coffee and stir it with a spoon, the oil will tend to float on the surface. When you drink it, you are consuming layers of pure oil rather than a properly mixed emulsion. This leads to poor absorption, an unpleasant taste, and a blunted metabolic effect. You must blend it. Use a blender, an immersion blender, or a high-powered milk frother. Blend your coffee with the MCT oil for about 15 to 20 seconds until the mixture is uniform and creamy, similar to the texture of a latte. This process creates a stable emulsion where the oil droplets are broken down into microscopic particles and coated with the coffee's natural emulsifiers, allowing for uniform absorption. Optionally, and highly recommended, you can add 1 teaspoon of grass-fed butter or ghee. This adds additional healthy fats that enhance the satiety effect, significantly improves the texture, and extends the duration of ketone production. It also contributes butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that supports the integrity of your gut lining and the health of your gut stem cells. The fourth priority is timing. Consume your MCT coffee within the first hour of waking before you eat anything. Then, ideally, delay your first meal for 2 to 4 hours. You don't need to force this. Most people find that the combination of caffeine, MCT oil, and butter produces sustained satiety and mental clarity, making it easy to postpone eating. During this 2 to 4 hour window, your body is actively burning stored fat, producing ketones, activating PGC1 alpha, maintaining BHB-mediated stem cell protection, and creating a glucose-poor environment that is hostile to cancer cell metabolism. This is your metabolic window. Protect it by not interrupting it with food, especially carbohydrates, which will immediately spike your insulin and halt ketone production. The fifth priority is what to combine this with for maximum effect. First, maintain a modest calorie deficit, aiming for 300 to 500 calories per day below your maintenance level. MCT oil significantly increases satiety, making this much easier than it sounds without causing hunger. Be sure to count the calories from the MCT oil as part of your daily intake, approximately 130 calories per tablespoon. Do not add it on top of an excessive caloric intake and expect to lose fat. Second, incorporate resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. This provides the essential mechanical signal your body needs to interpret the mTOR activation from ketones as muscle building, rather than just tissue maintenance. You don't need to go to a gym. Body weight squats, resistance band exercises, and moderate weight training with compound movements are perfectly sufficient. Consuming your MCT coffee 60 to 90 minutes before exercise provides sustained energy without relying on glycogen stores, meaning you'll feel strong throughout your workout and recover faster afterward. Third, follow your workout with 20 to 30 grams of protein within 2 hours. This provides the necessary raw materials for the muscle protein synthesis that the ketone-activated mTOR is signaling for. The combination of MCT oil's anti-catabolic effect, its mTOR activation, and post-workout protein creates the complete biochemical environment for simultaneous fat loss and muscle gain, the outcome demonstrated in the Nosaka study. You don't need to achieve perfection on day 1. Start with just 1 teaspoon of C8 MCT oil blended into your morning coffee on an empty stomach. That's all. Get that right for a week, then consider adding the butter, and then gradually extend your fasting window. Build the protocol gradually over 4 to 6 weeks. Consistency at 70% is far more valuable than achieving perfection for 2 weeks, followed by abandonment. Now let me tell you what to expect and when, because managing expectations is critical for people to stick with the program. In the first 2 weeks, you will likely notice increased morning energy and mental clarity before you see any significant changes in your body composition. The ketones from MCT oil are a preferred fuel source for your brain cells' neurons. Many people report a reduction in that mid-morning mental fog they had come to accept as a normal part of aging. This is a real and measurable effect, indicating your brain cells' mitochondria are responding to a more efficient fuel source. You may also notice reduced morning hunger, which is a beneficial side effect of ketone production. Weight on the scale might drop by 1 to 2 pounds, largely due to water loss associated with reduced glycogen stores. In weeks 3 through 8, fat loss starts to become more measurable. Expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds of fat per week, totaling approximately 4 to 8 pounds by the end of the 8th week. You'll begin to notice visible changes in body composition, primarily a reduction in abdominal circumference. Your energy levels will continue to improve as mitochondrial biogenesis starts to become more significant. If you are incorporating resistance training, your strength levels will likely hold steady or even improve despite being in a calorie deficit. This is the muscle preservation effect mediated by MCT oil in action. By months 2 and 3, the effects of mitochondrial biogenesis will be fully expressed. This is when people often describe experiencing something that sounds almost too good to be true, but is well documented in the research, feeling like they have the energy they had 10 years ago. This isn't a placebo effect, it's the result of having 28% more mitochondria in your muscle cells, each running more efficiently. Your biomarkers will also begin to improve. Triglycerides typically drop by 15% to 30%, HDL cholesterol rises, and fasting insulin levels decrease. These are the same biomarkers that are strong predictors of cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, and overall longevity. One important note on safety: MCT oil is extremely well tolerated by most people, but there are certain situations where caution is warranted. If you have active liver disease, you should consult your physician before using MCT oil, as all processing occurs in the liver and impaired hepatic function could be worsened by high fat intake. If you have type 1 diabetes, you need physician supervision, as the ketone production from MCT oil combined with insulin deficiency can create a risk of ketoacidosis. If you have type 2 diabetes managed with insulin or sulfonylureas, it's essential to monitor your blood glucose closely. MCT oil improves insulin sensitivity, which is generally beneficial, but it can lower your blood glucose enough to potentially require medication adjustments. If you are taking warfarin, you should monitor your INR, as changes in fat intake can affect vitamin K absorption and clotting parameters. For the vast majority of people over 60, without these specific pre-existing conditions, MCT oil stands out as one of the safest and most evidence-backed dietary interventions available. Look, the aging process after 60 is not a sentence. The patients I've witnessed who have transformed their metabolic health, reversed a decade of fatigue, significantly reduced their visceral fat, and seen their inflammatory markers normalize were not genetically extraordinary. They weren't doing anything exotic or extreme. They simply made 1 or 2 specific evidence-based changes to their daily routine, and they remained consistent. What you've learned today is this: after the age of 60, 3 biological processes, mitochondrial decline, stem cell depletion, and metabolic reliance on glucose, accelerate together, creating the underlying conditions for cancer, frailty, and metabolic disease. These processes are not independent. They share common underlying mechanisms, and those mechanisms respond to the same intervention, elevating BHB through C8 MCT oil in your morning coffee. The evidence for this comes from randomized, controlled trials published in top-tier scientific journals. The protocol is specific and achievable. 1 teaspoon of C8 MCT oil blended into your morning coffee, consumed in a fasted state, extended by a 2 to 4 hour eating delay, paired with a modest calorie reduction and resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. Start with 1 teaspoon tomorrow morning. Blend it for 20 seconds. Delay your breakfast by 2 hours. Give it 8 weeks. Your mitochondria will rebuild. Your stem cells will be maintained in a healthier, more functional state. The metabolic environment that cancer cells exploit will become significantly less hospitable, and the dangerous fats surrounding your organs will begin to decrease in a measurable, clinically validated way. If this type of evidence-based analysis is helpful to you, please subscribe and give this video a like. In our next video, I'll be covering the exciting emerging research on intermittent fasting and how combining a timed eating window with the MCT coffee protocol can amplify all 5 of these mechanisms even further. We'll also delve into specific data on what fasting does to cancer cell metabolism, something that very few in the medical community are openly discussing. Please comment below with your biggest question about this protocol, or let me know if you've tried MCT oil before and what your experience was. I read every single comment, and the questions you ask are instrumental in shaping what I research next. Keep investigating, and I'll see you in the next one.